it was always from the very beginning. People say, "Oh, this is your life; it's autobiographical," and I say, "No, it's semi-autobiographical. This is a lot of events that happened to me, and how I put them all together and made a Bronx Tale." And I always, and from day one, I've always said that. Basically, how Bronx Tale happened was the killing that you saw in the movie. That's exactly the way it happened. That is absolutely autobiographical. In other words, I was sitting there on a stoop, and all of a sudden, I saw these two cars fighting over. I thought they were fighting over a parking space, because one was pulling in, the other guy jumped behind them like that, and I was like, man, like, wow, this is going to be a beef. I knew they were going to fight, and all of a sudden, one guy got out of the car with a baseball bat, and he smashed the window of the guy in the back trying to sneak in behind him. And the guy got out of the car, and his whole face was covered with blood. And here am I, I'm 9, and I'm just like, from here to where you are. That's how close it was. And he went to hit him again, and this other guy, who was Sonny, but that wasn't his real name, but I had to change the names, obviously, comes shooting across and shoots him and kills him. And I just kept staring at him. And then he turned, and he kind of saw me over his shoulder, and then he just kind of turned and looked right at me, and I stared at him, and he stared at me. And it seemed like it was so strange, and we just stared at each other. And the next minute I knew, my father came down and grabbed me by my arm, and I flew up the steps. And I heard my mother screaming from the top floor. And then when I got there, she was concerned that I got hit. Maybe she started, feeling me all up, and I got upset. That's the only time I got upset, because she was crying, so that got me upset. So I told her, "Mom, don't cry," and then I said to my father, I said, "Well, it's a parking space. Why?" Because I couldn't understand it. Why would you kill somebody over a parking space? And my father said, don't worry about it, just be quiet. And he said something that was so profound to me. He said, sometimes people meet at the wrong time in their lives, which I didn't really. I think he was answering my mother, because my mother's going, "Why would he do it? Why would they?" And he just kind of said it to us. And then the cops came upstairs, and they wanted me to go down and pick out Sonny, but I never went downstairs. See, that's where as a writer you embellish. But I thought, if I have this, when I wrote it, I said, "Gee, if I have the lineup directly, it'll bond me and Sonny even tighter." But what happened was, I didn't go. And my father said, "He's not going downstairs." And he turned to me and said, "Did you see anything?" I said, "I didn't see nothing, Dad." The cop said, "You didn't see nothing." I said, and I remember he said a line. He said, "We didn't pick it." I remember when in the movie, we didn't pick your name out of a hat. In other words, the kid was there. Everybody says the kid was there. But he wouldn't let me go down, and I said I didn't see anything. So they knew it was, back then, nobody said nothing, and I didn't go down. But the next day, I was on the stoop, and Sonny walked by, and he kind of just pointed to me and, like, no words, "Good kid." And that's how it started. My real name is Calogero Lorenzo Palminteri. But nobody, who could call you Calogero, And, I mean, it's actually Charles in English. Calogero is Charles. Same in Sicilian, in Italian, it's Charles. So, and they called me C. I still have, to this day, guys who call me C. When I hear the word, "Hey, C," I go, uh-oh. I know it's not good news, and I turn around. Well, I used to bounce in Manhattan, and then when I went to LA, I ran out of money. I got parts like right away. I got on Hill Street Blues, a guest star in Matlock and Dallas, and I did a movie TV of the week. But then, as any actor, you run out of money after a year or so. You're using that money to live, and I ran out of money again, you know. So I said, all right, well, I'll go back to what I know. I'll start bouncing and getting working doors of clubs. So I went back and I started doing that. So I was at a club, a very swanky club in Beverly Hills. And I'm there and I'm you know, working there. And I was there for about 3 months, making money to survive, you know. And then finally, one night, this guy comes running over to the ropes. And I had the rope there with the clipboard, like you have. I have a clipboard with all the VIP guests. And he comes running over to the rope. Now, there's three things you can never do to a bouncer or a doorman. You can never touch the rope. You can never get in his face. And you can never say the words, do you know who I am? If you say those words, you're not getting in. Let me just clarify that to everybody out there. And this guy runs over, grabs the rope, gets in my face, and says, do you know who I am? So he broke all three rules coming into the gate. So I said, yeah, the other guy's not getting in tonight. He goes, you'll be fined in 15 minutes. I said, really? I said, well, get online. Everybody says that. So I left, and all of a sudden I hear everybody yelling, you know who this is? Everybody's yelling, and finally the boss comes out because he hears the commotion. And I hear the boss go, Swifty. And I said, Swifty? I said, no, that can't be. And all of a sudden it was Swifty Lazar. Swifty Lazar was the biggest agent in the world at the time. I mean, the biggest, at William Morris. And he said, you'll be fired in 15 minutes. And 15 minutes later, I got fired, just like he said. And it was his party that I wasn't letting him in, only because he was rude to me and he was in a rush. Be as it may, I got fired. I got back in my 1974 Honda. I had a little hole in the radiator and kept leaking water, you know. Every 3 days I started putting water. So I got in, I drove back to my apartment in North Hollywood. A dumpy, you know, really, ugh. But I'm an actor. I don't want to like cry. All actors, we're starved. That's how it is when you're acting. I lived in a dumpy, kind of like a motel thing. And I got there and I said, what am I going to do? And I saw this card. My father wrote, the saddest thing in life is wasted talent. And so I had that card, and I always had it on my refrigerator with a magnet, or I had it somewhere in the house. I looked at that, and I said, what the hell am I going to do? I said, well, if they won't give me a great part, I'll write one myself. So I get in the car. I drive back to Thrifty Drugstore. It was on the corner of Ventura Boulevard and Laurel Canyon. I think it was Laurel Canyon or Coldwater Canyon, I'm not sure. Anyway, I got 5 tabs of yellow paper. And I said, if they won't give me a great part, I'll write one myself. I said, I'll do a one-man show. I'll do all the parts. So then I thought, what am I going to write about? Then I thought about that killing. So I just wrote that one scene with the killing. And I performed it at my theater workshop on Theater West on Cahuenga. I was a member there because I started in the theater. That's how I started in New York. And I'm still a member. I mean, I'm a member of the Actors Studio where I still go. So anyway, but I did the first like 8 minutes, 7 minutes of the thing, and everybody was like kind of blown away by it. So I said, wow, it feels really good. So each week I would write 10 minutes and perform it on Monday night, 15 minutes perform it on my fifth, and I would take 3-4 minutes out of that. I cut out the rest. So I really workshopped it. So I had the best material to really put it together as best as I could. And at the end of maybe it was like 10 months, a year, I had 90 minutes of this one-man show. And then I performed it at my theater. One night, Carol, I forgot her last name, but she really gave me a big shot. She said, I'm doing a one-person show fest at East Coast Ensemble. Do you want to do your show? I said, I never did it before, the whole thing. I said, but I'll do it. And I did it that night for 300 people, if I'm not mistaken. And they just stood up and applauded for it felt like 10 minutes. And I said, wow, this is really something. And that's when I knew I really had something. Yeah, I mean, I borrowed money from a friend of mine, a legitimate guy, and I paid him back, of course. And I put the play up, and I'm telling you, in an instant, my life changed. Here am I living in this dumpy apartment with this dumpy car, and now it exploded. They say it only happened twice in entertainment history. It happened with Rocky, with Sylvester Stallone, and obviously Bronx Tale. It was crazy. They say it happened a little bit with My Big Fat Greek Wedding too, but the way it happened with us was Rocky, and it was amazing because I ended up doing a movie with Stallone, my first movie with him, and we talked about it. And who's really one of the smartest people I ever met and a great guy. But all of a sudden, my career just, I can't tell you what happened. The first week, first 2 weeks go by, and I get a call from a studio. They call me at home. I didn't even have an agent, and they offered me $250,000, and I was like, excuse me? They said, we want to give you $250,000 for your play. People from the development department came to see it. They want it. I said, well, let me think about it. So I hung up. I said, I'll talk to you tomorrow. And I thought about it. I had no money in the bank. I spoke to my family. I said, Mom, but I want to play Sonny. Because they said to me, we just want the rights to the show. That's it. You're out. We're going to rewrite the script. And I said, I thought about that. And I said, no. I said, it's my life. I'm playing Sonny. That's it. They said, well, this money won't be here if you say no. I said, no. Okay. I said, no. Crowds kept coming, bigger and bigger, just more crowds, lines around the corner. It was like a phenomenon. The reviews were like off the charts. If those were the reviews, you see them on the wall over there. In my office, I put some of those original reviews in. And all of a sudden, after maybe about 3 weeks, I get another offer from another studio, $500,000. A week later, again, I say, I play Sonny, I write the screenplay. No, can't do it. We have to put a star on the role. We think you're terrific in the show. You do a great job, but nobody knows you. And again, I said, forget it. So about a month later after that, just before I got an agent, and I tell this quick story because I want other actors who really have a dream out there to understand this. There I was. I live in a dumpy apartment, a shit car, no money in the bank. I got this phenomenal show, but I'm really paying back the guy who lent me the money, so I'm still not making money. Okay, so and all of a sudden it was William Morris, ICM, and CAA were chasing me because they were like chasing me just as much as the studios were to sign with them. Because all their big clients wanted to play Sonny, all their big directors wanted to direct it, all their big writers wanted to rewrite it. So they were getting pestered by their big clients. The biggest of the big wanted to play Sonny. Okay, I don't have to mention who they are because we're still friends. But I'm still friends with a lot of them. But they all wanted to, and the A+ directors all wanted to direct it. It was insane. I'm telling you, it was a phenomenon. This thing, what was going on? So finally, one night, I do the show after I turned down the $500,000, and I finished the show, and the stage manager walks over and goes, Bob De Niro was here tonight. I said, he really came? He was here? They said, yeah, he's in your dressing room. He just saw the show, and he came backstage. He's waiting for you in the dressing room. So I was like, damn, okay. I mean, everybody came to see it, all the big stars. And then this night, Bob De Niro came. So I walk into the dressing room, and Bob is, standing there, and I shake his hand, and here's like my idol. This guy was like, I saw him in Bang the Drum Slowly and Mean Streets. I remember it was a double bill. I saw him, and I saw him play these two parts. I went and Bang the Drum Slowly. I walked out. Actually, I was with Frankie Coffee Cake, and when I walked out, Dave was the guy who played him. And then we walked into Mean Streets. And I couldn't believe the same actor played both of those parts, So, and here am I now with this guy. Like one of the greats, if not the greatest actor of my generation. The greatest actor of my generation. One of the greats of all time, obviously. So he's talking to me. And he said something to me that was very profound. He said, look, I know you have a lot of people want this, so I'll be straight with you. He goes, but if you sell it, they're going to come to me anyway. So what he wanted was to control it. So this way, because if he sells it, if I sell it to a studio, then the studio dictates to him, well, oh, well, we want this. No, we don't want that. But Bob was producing then. Him and Jane Rosenthal. They just started their. Tribeca was really in the infant, early stages, you know. So they wanted to produce it, and I talked to Bob, and I said to him, I said, I know, I said, but Bob, here's the deal. I said, I have to play Sonny, and I have to write the screenplay because meanwhile, not knowing that I already wrote the screenplay, I didn't tell anybody. I was writing it while I was doing the thing, and I said, and he said to me, he goes, look, and I know Bob didn't like any holes, but that was the only way I was going to sell it, period. So Bob said, you'll play Sonny, you write the screenplay because it'll be honest, it's your life. He goes, I don't want to play Sonny. He goes, anyway, he wanted to direct it, and he wanted a smaller role, and he thought playing a smaller role, he can get the movie made, plus he wanted to direct. And the movie spoke to him, you know. We grew up in the same types of neighborhood, in the same neighborhood. He knew that milieu really good, you know. And I was like, okay, and we talked, and then I'll never forget it. Then we met again, and we talked, and he said to me, you know, it's 34 years ago, so I'm trying to remember exactly. But one line I remember, he said, and he said, if you shake my hand, this is the way it'll be. And then he looked at me, and he looks at me in the face and says, he holds his hand like this. He goes, you could make this movie, Chazz, with all these people, and I know all the names that want to do it. He says, but if you make it with me, I'll make it fucking right. And once he said that, I get the chills now thinking about it. I knew right there. I said, let's do it, Bob. And he kept his word. And I say it till this day. I said it on the 20th anniversary. I said it on the 25th anniversary. And I'll say it now. And I'll say it on the 50th anniversary if I'm still around. Bronx Tale came out the way it did because of Bob De Niro. Look, I knew I had a great script. But a bad director could fuck up a great script. A great director can't make a bad script great, but a bad director could really fuck up a great script, or a bad writer to rewrite it. But Bob kept the way it was. If you look at the one-man show that I still do, it's exactly like the movie. I mean, obviously, a few different things, but the dialogue, everything, the scenes, the way they flow, it's exactly like the movie. So Bob let me, when he read the script, he really loved it, but he let me touch it and nobody else. You know, he was smart. And he allowed me to be extremely collaborative with him. He wanted me on the set with him because he wanted to ask me questions about, did this really happen? How did this happen? What did your father feel in that moment? What did he say in that moment? So he was, you know, he's so in tune with every character. It was amazing. I mean, it was the highlight of my life because to work with him and to learn from him. And the movie came out the way it did because of Bob. Yeah, because the scenes were there already. All we had to do was cast. You know, Bob kept so true to the script. Look, were there changes? I remember in the scene in the one-man show, Sonny sits on the stoop with the boy and talks about Mickey Mouse, and Bob said, you know, he didn't feel that was right. But I had this fable feeling when I do the one-man show. But Bob said in reality Sonny wouldn't have sat on the stoop with him. He would have had somebody go get him and bring him to the thing. And after I thought about that, I said, well, you know what? He's right. And so I wrote a scene of Beansy coming to get him. He's playing with the bike and he brings him over. Bob was very, very, you know, he's very smart. You know, he wants things to be honest. If it's a joke and it's kind of like, well, go for the joke or go for the No, no. Bob wants it to be real. He'd rather be real and less funny than fake. So many people ask me, what was it like to work with Bob De Niro? Now I've been blessed. I've worked with Bob 4 times already. But obviously, Bronx Tale was the first. And I remember the thing that inspired me, that made me feel so welcome, was he was so collaborative. And I said to him, I don't know if Bob remembers this. I said to him, you're so, Bob, thank you for letting me know. He wanted me in the editing room. He was just so collaborative with me. And Bob really was the guy who made me realize that he said that nobody's that smart, Chazz. You know, and he goes, always listen to everyone's ideas and take the best idea. Because the person who takes the best idea, the director, you have as much talent as the same person. He goes, what are you doing? Protecting your piece from a good idea? Don't, he never felt threatened by anybody's idea. I remember we were sitting down once and there was this little scene of this guy had to come out of I forgot the actor's name. He was a very funny guy. But he comes out of the bar, and we needed a piece of business there to make the scene flow better. And I thought of something that wasn't that good, and Bob thought of something, and we just couldn't get it together. And there was a guy, the crab service guy, flipping hamburgers right near us. We had all these like neighborhood guys, and he goes, "Hey," Chazz, I got an idea. And I'm like, we do one of these. Like, what's that? He goes, yeah, you can, when the guy comes out, remember that we used to have the numbers, everybody would bet the number and what was leading, the 2 or the 3. And he walks out and goes, hey, what's leading? 2's leading. And I went, that's pretty good. He went, yeah, that's great. And we put it in the movie. So Bob was always so generous. And and I think probably he learned that, working with Marty Scorsese, I hear that Marty works the same way, where he lets people improvise, and he just, Bob would rather it be real, like I said, and less funny than funny and not real. He just wants it to be honest. And that's why when he's looking at Bronx Tale, it's almost like, it's like a documentary, but it's a film, but that's why it's so honest. And the honesty comes through. And that's what it's like working with him. I think it's timeless and universal because these are like the classic archetypes: the father, the son, Sonny. Look, Sonny is like an anti-hero. You know, let me tell you, the studio, I remember in the very beginning, I don't know if it was the studio we ended up doing it with, but I know they said they didn't want Sonny to die at the end. I said, he has to die. How could you say that? He has to die. I remember, I said, it's a catharsis. Sonny dies, and then the boy and the father live on. That's how it works. That's how drama works sometimes. Like Shakespeare, Romeo and Juliet, they kill each other, but the families come together. Just like West Side Story. It's an ending it's a catharsis. They didn't want to have the black girl story in the African American. I was like, you can't take that out. But the beauty of it, it wasn't even a question because Bob was there and he felt the same way I did, of course. And he just said, please. So that was it, and it just, it works because it's not about black and white. It's not Goodfellas. Goodfellas being one of the great movies of all time, but it's not that. A Bronx Tale is not a gangster movie. It's a family movie. A Bronx Tale is It's a Wonderful Life on steroids in the mob. That's what it really is. Think about it, because it's not about black and white. It's about gray and gray. Sonny, as bad as he was, and he was a bad guy. I'm not condoning what Sonny did. He would kill you. But other things about him, that he wasn't bad. He was funny. He was compassionate to people. He was very Machiavellian. He's the one who told me about Machiavelli, how he read Machiavelli in the jail. And I put that in the movie. Okay. My father, who was the greatest man I ever met, he had his faults. So it was like I took the best of the Sonny, the best of my father. And so there were always juxtapositions, who was right, who was wrong. And what Bronx Tale does is it makes young people look at that and say, wow, I mean, Sonny's a bad guy, right? Because I hear them talking. They study Bronx Tale in school. There's a book called The Moral Intelligence of Children by Robert Coles. And he devoted a little chapter to Bronx Tale in that. Because he talks about it made kids question, well, if Sonny's so bad, how come C learned so much? So it was very hard to define evil and good. Who was good? Who was bad? And it made people question that. And that's what makes Bronx Tale, till this day, a classic. Lorenzo obviously was my dad. My dad was, what you saw in the movie, that's my dad. My dad was a stand-up guy. My father wouldn't cheat anybody out of nothing. He wouldn't lie about nothing. My dad was so honorable to the point of like, he would rather hurt himself than lie or do something. I know that sounds crazy. I was trying to sell a car once. I had a 70-something Cadillac, a mint condition. I was on the road, and I remember coming back. I wasn't famous at the time. I think I remember this was in the 70s. And I remember coming home, and he said, nobody wants to buy the car. And I said, how could that be? Nobody wants to buy this car. It's cream puff. And then finally, I was home, and people came to buy it, and my father would go, well, we have a little trouble when it's cold here, and this, that. And he would tell everybody, I said, Dad, you can't say all these things. Nobody will buy it. He wasn't, it's not that I gave them a great car, but he told me, and that's, as soon as I got home, 2 days later, we sold it, But that was my dad. My dad was, and look, he knew who Sonny was, okay? And he knew that where he could cross. But when it came to his son, I had two daughters. I had two sisters. But I had to take them out because I wanted to make the movie just about us two. To this day, my sisters are still pissed off about that. But we laugh about it. And they were successful way before I was. My two sisters, very successful. But because my father said, don't waste your talent, all three of us. But it was just an amazing thing how my dad was just so, and my mother too. My mother she's mad at me because she says my part wasn't big enough. But we laugh about that. My mom passed away in 97, my father in 90. They saw all my success. God bless them every day. And but my father was a stand-up guy. He was a father that I want to be. If I could be half the father that he was, I'll be okay. Well, obviously, Calogero, he was me. I always felt like I was an artist, trapped in this guy, you know. I wrote poetry, I wrote lyrics because I was in a band. I wrote little short stories. And, I used to hide that, I didn't talk to my friends about it. I grew up in this a great neighborhood. People think, wow, you grew up, you saw this. No, it wasn't. Were there drugs there? Yeah. Were there junkies there? Absolutely. Was there violence there? Yes. But to me, it was a great neighborhood. I loved it. I loved growing up there. We had a great time growing up in the street like that. But I loved it. And I was this guy, I was an artist trapped in this Italian street body. I think that's why when I did Bullets Over Broadway, Woody Allen said that I was born to play that part because I was an artist. I didn't go to Columbia or Harvard. I went to Bronx Community College. But I just had this, I had a gift. Well, I mean, and he navigates between Sonny and the father he's constantly being tested. Okay? He's constantly being tested. Does he go this far? Does he cross the line? Does he not cross the line? His father's always saying, you're going to get into a bad thing with those guys. The scene with the bikers, I was there. That's absolutely what happened. I was sitting at the edge of the thing, and when Sonny says these words to the guy, the guy came off like this big tough guy, and then he says, now you can't leave. Now you can't leave. Who is this man to say that to these big tough guys? because they didn't realize this was in a different league right now. And they beat the shit out of them, pistol whipped them, bats, and I didn't do anything. I was 17 and I could handle myself, but I was just pushed to the side because the violence was so, like, extreme prejudice. Bam, bam, So it was always like, and then when my father found out about it, he said, "Were you there?" And I go, "Yeah." He goes, "You could have got killed." I said, "No, I was." Oh my God. So it was always something. I was always in, do I do this? Do I do that? Do I do this? Do I do? And the reason why I am here today is because of my mother and father, not because of Sonny. I mean, no, well, obviously, yes, Sonny had a lot to do with it. But when that car came and the car pulled up and they said, get in the car when they were going to throw the Molotov cocktails, I never got in the car. See, that's where, again, I embellish. That's why I always tell people it's semi-biographical, autobiographical. I put my foot in the car, and just like in the movie, he said, I said, "Where'd you get this car?" They said, "We borrowed it," and they started laughing. Obviously, I knew right there. They hot-wired it, and they robbed it. And I thought of my mother and father, and I thought of hurting them, and I just, especially the cocktails and the smell, and I backed off. And I didn't go in. And then they pulled out, and then Sonny pulled up. "Where the hell you been? What's going on? Get in the car." So I thought him pulling me out of the car would even bind us a little more. How did your father come up with that line, "Saddest thing in life is wasted talent"? Many people ask me that because it's a very famous line in the movie. Well, that's my father's line. What happened was, it really stems from, there was a fighter named Billy Bello who fought for the fought for the welterweight championship, if I'm not mistaken. And Billy Bello was from my neighborhood. He was a great fighter. And he had talent like you cannot believe. And my father, he wasn't his trainer, but he helped with that. And Billy Bello fought Gaspar Ortega at Madison Square Garden. And then 2 weeks later, my father and his friend, Michael, they found Billy Bello with a few other people on the roof with a needle stuck in his arm. He died 2 weeks later. 2 weeks right after. And he actually was shooting junk, we think, while he was training. And he went 15 rounds with the champion of the world. And he was only 18 years old. And my father cried. One of the few times I saw my father cry. And he said, "The saddest thing in life is wasted talent, Chazz." Well, he said, "See." He goes, "Son, just promise me you won't waste your talent." I said, "I promise that." And that's where that line comes from, My dad, I used to watch my father get up at 3. My father had to be at the garage get his bus at 5 o'clock. And we were 10 minutes. We lived 10 minutes from the garage on Belmont Avenue. 10 minutes. It was West Farms, 10 minutes. My dad, he would get up at 3:30. We were 10 minutes from the garage. You had to be there at 5 o'clock. I used to come home late at night from being out all night, hanging out. And I said, "Dad, why do you get up so early?" He says, "Well, you never know. You can get a flat." Get a flat? What are you talking about? My father was a bus driver for 30 years. He was never late once. Never once. 30 years. I think he took 7 sick days in 30 years. I mean, the man was, and he said to me, in the way he showed it to me, that the working man is a tough guy. It doesn't take much strength to pull a trigger. It doesn't. But get up in the morning every day and work for a living. That's a tough guy. He was right, And so I think it speaks to all the working people in the world who, you know what? This is a movie that says something about me. That I've been busting my ass all my life, taking care of my family, making sure there's food on the table, making sure my kids have a better life. This movie's for me. Not just men and women. Let me clarify that. The working man's a sucker. And it's both, men and women. At the time in the 60s, it was more a dominant men thing. They worked more in the 50s and 60s. Where sometimes you didn't want your wife to work because some of those guys felt, oh, no, no, it looks bad for me if my wife works. You know. But this movie's dedicated to women. My mother worked. She was a seamstress. We needed money. So this movie's dedicated to men and women, the working people. Those are the ones. Those are the ones who are the heroes. The funny thing about the movie is, people go, how did you cast all these guys? And it was Bob's idea to have just non-actors. So we got the real Eddie Mush, and we got all these actors, to be in all these non-actors to be in the movie. These were like guys on the corner. We had to audition a lot of guys. So the funny thing about it was, when we finally got this crew together, we did the crap game scene with the crap game when I was throwing the dice. So Bob De Niro wanted to use real money. Bob's like, no, 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 we got to get real money. I don't want no fake money on the set. I want real money. I want to feel it. I want to smell it. I want to feel the money there. So I think we got like, I don't know, $10,000 to $15,000 worth of tens, 20s, hundreds like that. So the prop guy, it's a prop. So he passes it out to all the guys. So we do the scene the first day. It's a 3-day shoot just for that one scene. And after the first day of shooting, the prop guy walks over to Bob and says, Bob, we're $1,400 short. They stole the money. I mean, these street guys, they can't help themselves. So the next day when they came in, Bob goes, look, guys, you can't take the money home with you. You got to put the money back. So they put it all back. But it was so funny. They didn't know nothing about acting. They just were themselves, And so, and you would hear them go, there was this one guy, Squiggy. Squiggy, his real name is Ralphie. Scolante, he's a real character. But anyway, we said, Ralph, he said, look, I can't come tomorrow, I have to go shopping, take my wife shopping. We're like, what are you talking about? Well, it was Wednesdays when I take my wife shopping. What are you, crazy? You're in the background. You got to be here. It was like, oh, I gotta get a massage. No, guy, they didn't understand that you got to be here. So it was so funny because they got educated as we were doing the movie, what it's like to be in it. And after that, they said, I don't want to be in a movie. You got to wait around too much. It was funny.
Give me the tickets. But Sonny, we're winning. We can't win. Mush bet kryptonite. Fucking jinx. Come on, you're the boss. We're 5 links in the lead. Come on. We've been mushed. Come on, kryptonite. Come on.
The nicknames were great. I had to change some of the nicknames because, again, some of those nicknames, the famous guys were away, and I didn't want to, I couldn't do that. The funny character was Eddie Mush. That is Eddie Mush. I mean, that's really Eddie Mush. And we were trying to cast that part, and I remember we couldn't cast him. And Bob said, well, where's the real Eddie Mush? I said, well, he's up in the Bronx. He goes, why don't we take a ride up there? I said, well, okay. And we got in a town car. We drove up there, and we had the driver. And I get out of the car, and I see Eddie Mush by the bookmakers, of course. So I walk over to him. I go, hey, Mush, what's going on? He goes, hey, see, what's that? He goes, I hear you're making a movie about the neighborhood. I go, yeah. I go, listen, come over to the car. There's somebody who wants you to meet. And what does he say? I'm not going over to that car. You're not setting me up. He goes, I owe too many people money. I go, Eddie. Robert De Niro was in the car. He goes, bullshit. I go, he's in the car. So he walks over to the car, and Bob De Niro rolls down the window, and he looks at him. He goes, oh, shit, it's you. And Bob, we're laughing, Bob says, look, Eddie, I want you to come to my office on Monday, at 12 o'clock. I want you to read some things. Would you do that for me? Now, picture Robert De Niro, the biggest star in the world, tells you this. No matter what you got planned, you're going, right? Here's Eddie Mush does this. He goes, 12 o'clock Monday. He goes, can I come at 3? And Bob just looks at me. I look at him. And he goes, sure, yeah, we'll make it 3. And he goes, but Eddie, what do you have to do at 12? That's so important. He goes, well, I always make the daily double, Bob. I never miss the daily double at the racetrack. He goes, okay, Eddie, no problem. And we leave, and Bob looks at me and goes, come on, That's the guy. That's the guy. He's got to play the part. And Eddie Mush played the part. And then Frankie Coffee Cake, and that's a real guy. Jojo the Whale, that's a real guy. His name was changed. Bobby Bars, uh, wa- Bobby Bars was similar. He was always in jail, so they called him. I changed it to Bobby Bars. You know, Frankie Ko was a guy who used to knock people out all the time. Again, his name was changed. I had to because they had family there. They were in jail, and I didn't want to bring that up. People always ask me what's my favorite scene from the movie, and that's an easy one because I said it from the moment I saw it. Bob was doing the scene with the boy. He slaps him when the boy wants his money back. The working man's a sucker. I'm the tough guy. When the little boy says, no, he said, no, I'm the tough guy. And then he hugs him and he says, I'm sorry. And he and he puts him and he walks back, and Sonny's looking at him and the kid, and they say, should I take care of him? They said, no, leave him alone. But it's that scene because I was looking through the lens, and I was watching it through the lens, and when it was over, then I saw the thing and the replay, and I turned to Bob and I said, it's the best scene in the movie, Bob. I said, that's the greatest scene in the movie. And he, Bob is so modern. He just goes, no. I said, I'm telling you, that's the best scene in the movie. I'm not in the best scene in the movie, and that's the best scene in the movie. And I could tear up right now thinking about it because my dad, you could see the love that my father had for the boy. He felt so bad that he smacked him, but he was so mad. My father was so mad that here's a boy who's so close. Because my father knew my dreams of being an actor and a writer. He knew that, but he knew that the streets could end that dream at any moment. And he always feared that to me. He feared that, and that scene, I still see it today, breaks me up. I feel, oof, wow. It resonates because it's a great story. Look, it worked as a one-man show. It worked as a movie, and it worked as a musical. Now, it's the same story, but each one stands on its own. Because the one-man shows is the original. The movie is much different than the one-man show, and the musical. Now, don't forget, we're doing a musical now, and who do we have doing the musical? We have music by Alan Menken, 8-time Academy Award winner. We have Glenn Slater, I think 3-time nominee, Tony nominee, doing the lyrics. Bob De Niro, who did the movie. And we have one of the greatest directors in theater, Jerry Zaks, doing the theater. And Tommy Mottola producing. And Michael David and Lauren Mitchell, who did the Jersey Boys. So we had a great team behind us. But still, it worked as a musical. It worked as a one-man show. It worked as a movie. In fact, I think it's the only time in history where the same actor wrote and starred in each one. I think. I could be wrong, but I think. So I think Bronx Tale will be here way after I'm gone, way after we're all gone. And I think it's just a classic that people will constantly revisit. You just have people looking at it. People who see the one-man show see it 20 times, 30 times. I still do it all over the country. Sell out every time. They see it more than once because it makes people feel. Bronx Tale, whether it's the movie, the musical, the one-man show, people stand up and cheer at the end. People cry at the end. It's one of those things I wrote lightning in a bottle. Did you know it at the time? Of course not. In the words of Bob De Niro, used to say, nobody's that smart. You know what I mean? You write something and you see what happens. I wrote A Bronx Tale because I was so depressed and broke. I wrote it, I'm hoping I get an agent, okay, out of it. And look what happened. Here it is. 30 years later with the movie, 34 years later with the one-man show.